When you're standing on the beach at Cleethorpes, the sight you see is of a long sandbank stretching out, sheltering the estuary from the North Sea. And it's that unique place, which is Spurn Point, which is our destination.
Spurn has more than one aspect to its not uniqueness, if you can say that. Unique means there's only one thing, but it's important for the wildlife, the birds primarily, that feed, winter and pass on this mud and over it, and they use it as a pantry, a restaurant at all times of the year. And also it's important for its geological formation. This huge sand spit running in front of a very large estuary, a large running body of water that drains over a fifth of England, and yet you've got sand barring its exit to the sea. So those two aspects alone make it a very, very special and important place.
Stretching 3.5 miles long and only 50 metres wide in places, it's a sacred site, a national nature reserve, which has played an important role over the years.
Spurn's got a lot to offer, and people have their own interpretation of what Spurn is about. For the bird watchers, we say it can be the mudflats, it can be the birds passing out to sea, or it can be the spring and autumn migration. But buckets and spades, people who come just to enjoy the beach, don't want the amusements. You've got somewhere to sit, as we are on the beach now. You've got two sides of the peninsula, so if the wind is in one direction, you go on the other side in the shelter of the dunes. You've got your fishermen who can come down here. It's easy access for fishing. You can drive onto the peninsula, and it's not far to carry your equipment from the car to the fishing area. There is bait digging for lugworms is permitted on the sands, and I'm told it's quite easy digging, if any digging's easy. And it's a place of open space. It's not far from the city of Hull, but you're far enough away to feel you're out in the middle of nowhere.
The Yorkshire Wildlife Trust has owned Spurn Point since the 60s, when the Ministry of Defence sold it to the charity. The Great Sand Spit has had a colourful history.
First World War, men were based down here. Napoleonic times, it's reported that men used the peninsula as to look out for invasion, and even back to the Spanish Armada, beacons were erected on the peninsula to warn of the invading Armada.
One of its most striking features is the lighthouse, built from Staffordshire bricks, which stands overlooking the estuary. This is just one of many that has stood here overlooking the estuary and the North Sea. Records show one having been here in 1427.
To me, it marks the gateway to Europe. If you're going out or coming in on the ferry, it's Spurn Lighthouse, which tells you either leaving Britain or you're arriving at Britain. And it can be seen for miles around. And it is the social history, and it's what a lot of people relate to Spurn and what Spurn's about. And if that is it, then so be it. That does not impact on the reason the Trust owns Spurn. People would be more than happy to come and view and enjoy the lighthouse, and they would not be detracting from the wildlife habitats on the peninsula. The lighthouse we're in at the moment, at the top of the 140 odd steps we've just come up, is what is known as the high light. The low light over to our left on the river was built to the latter period of Smeaton's Lighthouse. So this was opened up in about 1893, had a long and illustrious life, guiding shipping in and out the Humber, to be decommissioned around sort of 1985, of when the lamp was stripped out of where we stood at the moment. So this is stood on not quite the end of the peninsula. We're about half a mile from the end of Spurn, but it's near enough to mark out the sandbars and the stony binks out to the seaward side. The deep water channel of the estuary runs just off the point end, and it's this still a visual landmark to all who look onto Spurn or visit the place.
In the past, great efforts were made to prevent the spit from moving, but this has proved to have had a detrimental effect on the surrounding environment.
It's just we have this perception of how it should be and how it should remain, but the very nature of Britain has been changed by man. Possibly one of the biggest influences is rabbits, introduced by the Romans and their grazing, or the clearing of the wildwoods by man when they went from nomads to becoming sedentary farmers. What period in history are you trying to capture? What I feel we are now doing is to allow natural processes to take over so that we don't lose that natural process of the action of the sea, and we don't have this clinical hard edges of man's immediate intervention. But as you see, here we've got this grassy, which you would call chalk grassland, and that's brought about by man's intervention. This grassland is something you may see on the Lincolnshire Wolds. You may not see the sea wormwood there, which is one of the herbs within it, because that's the coastal influence. But if that chalk comes further down to the coast, you may see that there, or somewhere like Humberston Fitties, where you have the dunes coming in and the sea coming in, you would see sea wormwood. So that is there's all this little micro habitats on Spurn.
Every year, thousands of people come to Spurn to marvel at its greatness, look for fossils, or to simply look at the wildlife that has made this place its home. Will it still be here for future generations to enjoy? Andrew has his own theory.
I think it would be there would be pieces of similar habitats. There may not be this actual habitat that we're sat on with the chalk influence. It may not be in this location, in this form, but I can't see it disappearing. Maybe the next ice age will reform the whole of northern Britain and Spurn will disappear, as Lake Humber disappeared from the last ice age when it broke out and it formed the River Humber. But no, I think the geographical structure is here for a very, very long time.
Spurn harbours many feelings for many people. Walking along the beach, you get the impression of being very alone, and I felt a great reverence for the place, humble in the wake of the mighty sea. For Andrew, an ex-East Riding Council employee, he wouldn't change it for anything.
I've been coming to Spurn since the mid-70s. My primary interest is birdwatching, and it is one of the best places in the country to birdwatch. And to have that opportunity to be here and birdwatch, I thought was fantastic. But since coming here, I've developed a greater interest in the place as a place and what its importance is as an all-round environment. The mud which the birds feed upon, the mud flats with its plants, its use as a resource to people to enjoy as an introduction to wildlife. So it's about having that opportunity to talk to people, introduce people to nature, conservation, and yet still make Spurn mainstream and enjoyable rather than extreme. And the sandal and itchy jumper brigade. That's not what Spurn is about. Spurn is about social inclusion and people to enjoy, but hopefully appreciate why the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust own it.
One can never tame the sea. We admire its graceful beauty as waves crash against the shore, and yet we quake at its might to do untold damage. Since 1810, a lifeboat station has been at Spurn Point and is home to the Humber lifeboat. The crew of 7 are full-time employees and live at Spurn Point with their families. Dave Steenvoorden, Superintendent Coxswain, was born in Grimsby and spent many years as a fisherman.
If there was still a fishing industry, money to be earned, I'd still be fishing. I can't think of a better job to do other than fishing than lifeboating.
The job is their mistress, and they are there day and night, ready to answer an emergency call, going out in all weathers.
The Humber lifeboat can do any sort of rescue. We will do tow your homes for a yacht who's run out of fuel, fishing boat broken down, right up to a ditched aircraft, sinking ship, tanker explosions. There's any rescue you can think on the sea, the Humber Lifeboat will get involved in.
The lifeboat used is an all-weather 7 class, which cost £1.8 million, all raised from charitable donations, and it's filled with the latest technology.
It's a Cleethorpes boat. She's a small, fast, inflatable. She can work close to the shore, rescuing kids blown off an airbeds, cut off by tide. That sort of dash and grab rescue, as we like to call it. The Humber Lifeboat, because she's a big, powerful boat, we go more to sea. We can be 50 mile off, towing a fishing boat in or doing a rescue.
In July, Dave received an award, one of many lifeboatmen of the Humber Lifeboat have received over the years for bravery at sea.
It's a cracking rescue. There was a beam trawler working from Grimsby on the south side of the river. She got a foul propeller. There was a force 8 gale, quite a heavy surf and heavy snow, and she was being blown up onto the shore. That's where the differences with the lifeboats really come into their own. The inshore lifeboat from Cleethorpes was working with us. We was in there for the weight and the power to pull the fishing boat in, but the inshore boat was in there in case anything went wrong. She could dash around, scoop all the people up.
The crew all worked at sea in different capacities before joining the RNLI, and there's a wealth of skill and experience among them. I felt a great sense of camaraderie and passion for the job, something which is testified by the fact there is not a high turnover rate of crew.
We all know when we move to Spurn Point why we're coming, and we're here purely for the lifeboat. We come with our families, which makes it interesting for them because Dad's at home all the time. We work 7 days on duty and we get 1 day off. Our day off is 8 in the morning till 8 the next morning. Our 7 days on duty, we cannot leave the station. We're here purely to man and maintain the lifeboat. What I will say about Spurn Point is we've got a fantastic community. We've got kids that play like the kids used to. We've got wives who look after each other, that help each other. The nature of the job at Spurn Point, it makes it for a very close community.
Everyone I spoke to had nothing but a high regard for this wonderful place which is Spurn Point. Life here is idyllic, and yes, there are the ups and downs, but I felt a great community spirit.
It's absolutely great. I love it. I say I came from Cleethorpes and I didn't think I'd settle, but we've been here nearly 14 years now and it's an idyllic place, especially for children growing up. The community's good. We all get on well. The only time there's a problem, if the kids are arguing, then the parents get involved and then kids are friends 5 minutes later and the parents are still arguing, but I mean that happens anywhere, but generally we are a good lot down here.
There are 11 children on the spit and 1 on the way. For the youngsters, it's great fun. For a newcomer to this type of life, it can be quite daunting at first.
It was hard at first because I couldn't drive, and you really do need to be able to drive down here because the wives do everything. So it took me a few months to pass my test, but once I passed my test, it became a lot easier.
Shopping is done in bulk and there's no nipping out for a forgotten item, but rain or shine, life goes on down here. To me, these men are brave, but they'll tell you different. It's their life and it's a job. Then it was my go. But don't worry, I won't give up the day job, but I think I did all right. It was a real privilege to meet them, the unsung heroes of the 4th Emergency Service.